everyone, and welcome to UBT Live. It is episode number 12. We just keep racking them up, and for some reason, people keep watching, so we'll keep doing them. So we appreciate all of you that find value in everything that we do. My name is Roger Phipps. I am COO and co-founder for Seven Lights Marketing, Bird Eye View Inc., Boss Leadership Solutions, and your consultant for everything business, leadership, ops, and tech. So thank you again for joining us this week. We've got the boys that I'm going to bring into the show now. Let's start with Rob Powers. Hey, Rob, welcome back to the show this week.
Hey, Roger. How are you doing?
I'm doing amazing, and I appreciate you being here. I'm not fully caffeinated, so you guys are only getting half the energy that you usually do, but I promise I'll pick it up as we go. And then next we have Alan Levin, and everyone please give him a virtual round of applause. He is coming to us from sweltering South Florida without any AC and is toughing it out for all of you. So welcome to the show, Alan. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Roger. Happy to be here.
All right, man. So I'm going to remind you guys, we do have another member of our show, Josh Lazar. Josh is actually remote in Mississippi right now. He was partying with some of his peers there and is going to try to pop in late in the show. He's super excited about this week's topic, as am I. It's hotly contested. It's, work environments. Are you leveraging a remote work environment, a traditional, or a hybrid? So we're going to talk about all of the pros and cons with that this week. Talk a little bit about what that means for your culture and really kind of explore this. We had a little bit of a discussion with some folks earlier, and they got excited about this. There's a lot of energy about this. People are pretty well entrenched one way or the other. So, one of the things to consider is, are we talking about a small business, a medium-sized business, or a large business? So all of that is to come. We're excited to talk about this. And without further ado, let's start with our first topic. So I kind of mentioned it, but let's kind of talk through what it means to have the three different types of work environments, right? So just to clarify and set the stage for everyone, obviously a traditional work environment is what you're used to, right? 2020 and the COVID pandemic kind of disrupted, in my opinion, positively disrupted that dynamic. Traditional is basically you show up for work at 8 o'clock or 7:30 or 6 o'clock, or those on the night shift at 11. And you're in a place with a bunch of people, you do your thing, and then you go home. And that's a traditional work environment. It's been that way for ages. Then 2020 happened and things kind of changed. And we went from that type of environment to a remote environment. Remote being, hey, you've got teams that are all over the place. They can log in. Technology has allowed us to log in, operate, monitor, and manage people remotely at any given time, any place that they choose to work from. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then hybrid. So after 2020 kind of left, then we got a new norm, which was hybrid. There was a lot of people that paid for a lot of commercial property that they were getting no return on investment on. And you saw a lot of large organizations, the platform formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, was one of those that was telling everybody to come back to work. We want you in your seats. We want you together. And there were several organizations that went hybrid with it, which means, hey, part of the time you get to work from home, but we want you at work 1 to 2 days a week. And then in my experience, talking to different organizations, then they changed that to 3-4 days a week. And then it's like, is it truly hybrid, or are you just giving me a day off? So, that's kind of how it's evolved. And the pendulum has swung one way out of necessity. Proved the concept, swung the other way. And now we're working to whatever that happy medium is going to be. So let me start off with this. Have either of you guys had any experience with, remote environments, hybrid environments? Are you participating in that today? Do you allow your people to participate in that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
You go ahead first, Alan.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. My second ever job out of college working for Comcast back in 2014, one of the appeals of the job to me was they said it was a hybrid schedule, and I had actually never even heard of that at the time. So back in 2014, they're doing that. But I remember I had gone to California a couple of weeks before that, and I had a couple of friends there, and they all said that they worked from home. And I was like, "What? You work from home? I've never even heard of that." So, I think a lot of progressive companies had been doing that for a while. But there had even been a couple ones down here that had done the hybrid. And I felt, as when I was an employee, the hybrid approach was, I felt the best way to have that like balance where you don't feel the monotonous of like a 9 to 5 going in every day, the same routine. It allowed you to break up your week a little bit, look forward to the days that you're working from home and still get the job done. But now as an employer, I can kind of see both sides that, when you employ people from home, there's always a little bit of that worry or that curiosity. Are they actually getting the job done? Are they going to go do their laundry or go run errands and things like that? But I think the best for just kind of a mental health perspective, and I think getting the most out of your employees and keeping them satisfied is to at least, I think hybrid is the best option to allow for them to work a little bit from home, but also have that face-to-face and that camaraderie that you build when you're in person together.
Awesome. Rob, let's swing over to you. What do you think? What has your experience been?
It's interesting. In my previous business, we did have remote workers. And that came kind of out of situations of the employee moving because of their spouse moves or this. And we were able to make them remote at that time. So we never had employees that we hired specifically for remote that didn't work in the office. So they were like billers for our company, and then they would move. And that's something that was very easy to monitor what their work was, if they got their work done. I don't care what time of day they get it done, as long as they get their workload done. It's not like they're responding to customers or this. They just have to get their work done. So they could do it from anywhere. And it's very easy to monitor them, what their output is, what their daily billing amount was. So that worked well for us, but we already had the culture of what was expected from them because they had worked in the office. Besides that, even in that group, it was a little weird because we were at 6 different locations. So you would sometimes go without seeing the other employees for 3-4 weeks. You would see your little team or your little pod, right? And that's what you would see daily. And then we would get together to have meetings to discuss things and this. And sometimes we would talk on the phone and this. But that was kind of like a weird type of remote because we didn't see each other every day. And that kind of, I think you really have to make sure you're having events and meetings and dinners and things to keep that culture of the whole group together, and that's a very important component of that.
Okay, so both of you covered a lot of or touched on a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about tonight in your answers. So let's focus a little bit. So I'm going to focus on pros and cons, right? And the way I'd like to start off with is pros. So what are the pros as either a business owner or a business leader for empowering your employees to work remotely or hybrid? And then I'd also like to kind of touch on what are the pros of that standard model as well. And then we'll move on to the cons of each. So I'll start with pros, and what I'll say to this is some of this is dependent on the type of business that you own or that you lead, right? And some of this is also dependent on the size of your organization. So, for example, a startup, right? With startups, there's a lot of advantages of being around each other all day, right? It creates that bond and that foundation for the culture of the organization. If you don't have anything that's existed before that, that's how it's created and then carried forward. And it's much easier to export that after it's already established versus trying to start it that way. But for pros, you know, my marketing agency, which is Seven Lights, which you see behind me, not Smarty Pants with a Z, but Seven Lights Marketing, we are all remote. And the purpose for that really was we wanted to not limit our talent to where our base was, right? So the founders of it, of Seven Lights, was myself, another gentleman who lives in Alabama, and another gentleman who lives in Georgia. And, you know, one, it's kind of hard for us all to be in the same place, but we didn't want to try to draw talent only from those specific areas. We wanted to be able to get the best of the best for our clients. So therefore, we embraced it. So we have folks all over the country that contribute to our success. So that was one of the pros. The second pro was, you know, quite frankly, cost. Most of what is most of the cost that's associated with running a business is people. So part of that is going to be their salary and their benefits that you provide to them, but also giving them a place to be, paying for, utilities, internet, all that other fun stuff for them to be in one place. Now, as an employer, it also allowed me to provide a benefit. So to turn something that would cost me something into a benefit for an employee. For example, if you're going to pay for internet anyway by having everybody all in one place, if you credit, right, the employee for their internet or give them a portion of that and credit that back to them in their paycheck every month, you're going to end up maybe spending a little bit more. But when you think about the infrastructure that's required, spending $300 or $400 a month, that goes a long way to get towards giving someone the credit to their own home internet and encourages them to have home internet that's appropriate for your business. So that's a pro for it as well. And then, obviously, for me, what I've found with the employees, and this doesn't ring true for everybody. There's people that will take advantage of this. But my employees are more productive. They appreciate not having to drive in, so they'll actually work extra. And so I looked up some of these statistics nationally for this, and come to find out, there's actually more time being worked by remote employees, right, than there are folks that are in person. And that's because they're not spending so much time doing water cooler talk, right? Because the times that you need to communicate are focused in scheduled meetings, right? B, they are using that extra time, and not everybody will do this, but most people are using that extra time that they would use to commute to actually work, right? And C, that water cooler talk or that stuff, there is something to be said for being able to stop by somebody's office, but people get too comfortable with that. And statistically, every time that you stop someone from doing their work at their office by stopping in or popping your head in, even if it's just for a greeting, it takes them an average of 20 minutes to get back in the mindset and the zone that they were before they were interrupted. So there's a lot of time and productivity recouped in that. So those were the pros really for me. And obviously it was a pro for the employees that they enjoyed too, that we were able to offer that. But before we go any further, I'm going to bring our resident party animal, Josh Lazar, into the stream. He is not wearing a jacket this time because he is in his car. The dedication that he's showing here. So let me bring him in. Josh,
hey,
how's Mississippi?
Pretty good. Question: can you hear me okay? Because this is not my normal setup.
Actually, we can hear you great.
That's awesome. Can you hear the blues in the background?
We cannot. Only you. So
that's unfortunate for anyone watching this or seeing this, because it's interesting. I'm actually sitting in front of the Delta Blues Museum in Clarksdale, Mississippi at the moment, and I have a lot of history with the blues based off of some family. Completely different topic for a completely different time. But yeah, I'm sitting in my non-air conditioned car. So that's where I'm at right now in the middle of Mississippi while I'm waiting to go to listen to some blues music after we talk about whether I should be on the clock or not. And is this considered work time? Because this would be maybe work from home, right?
Well, I will say this, 2 out of the 4 people in this call today have air conditioning. So congratulations, Rob. You are 2 of the 4. Obviously, we are winning the evening and the Southeastern Heat competition right now. But thank you, Josh, for joining. You're coming through loud and clear. I'm glad you're having a good time. If you happen to want to spit some bars of blues music, we won't stop you unless it's absolutely terrible. I can mute you. So just be aware of that. All right, I'm going to move on. Let me just to kind of catch you up. We're talking about the pros, right, of allowing folks to work remote or hybrid from an employer's perspective, not from the employee. We'll get to the employee later. We're talking about the employer now. So, Alan, I'm going to bring you back into the stream, or onto the screen, not the stream, because you're always here. And why don't you share us what you think your pros are specifically as an employer?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, maybe other people might disagree, but I feel like just the appreciation and the kind of the work-life balance that employees get. I've found that, they can be very productive at home. So I just think there's an overall appreciation for that trust that you're giving them, the flexibility and the freedom that you're giving them. And I think that's been a really good plus in my business. And also, I'm in digital marketing. So I think the cool part about my job is that I can literally work from anywhere over the world. I can work with a client. It doesn't matter where they are location wise, where I am. I mean, everything happens online. So it'd be a little hypocritical for me to say that an employee had to always be in my presence, 5 days a week, 9 to 5 or whatever the case may be. So to me, that kind of comes down to the main benefit. It kind of, I think, creates, establishes a little bit more trust. And I think employees ultimately appreciate that factor.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And you actually take it a step further because yours are not just remote, yours are also overseas. So there's a talent acquisition that you would not have access to if you were just saying, hey, people can only work on site or on prem, right? You would lose the ability to get not only those employees and their talents, but also at the rate that you're paying them because it is discounted.
Yeah, that's true. It's the benefit of, having the ability to be, exclusively online is, you have access to people all around the world, and it allows you to find talent that, maybe there's a negative connotation there with, it's not a stateside employee, but you really can find some great talent of people that, want the opportunity. You may have to train them or mold them a little bit more, but, they're hungry and, they're good at what they do.
Awesome. Josh, just out of curiosity, you just got done from a 90-minute dinner, so I don't think you're hungry, right?
No, not at all. The pros. So no, not hungry. I also have already driven 5 hours today, and I have an hour and a half left. It's been a long working day, and I could not work remote today. I had to be physically in person. What we're doing is some operational assessments. So to understand operations with physical organizations, to have physical structures of people, mostly in the office, got to meet them in the office. So today was not a work remote day, and neither is the rest of this week. But A, not hungry. B, on the owner view of work from home on the pro side, I yes and to everything Alan just said, because you can find talent anywhere in the world. You can live your own motto and ethos. And if you say you're for a certain initiatives, I've heard someone say that work from home is feminist because there are a lot of things different people do that they can't do if they're taking minutes or even an hour to drive to work or get ready for work or work with families. Actually, I was at a client site today and we had a conversation and I talked about that I might be live on a podcast today talking about work from home. And she's like, yeah, you're probably going to talk about this conversation. And I am. I hope you have this research, Roger, but I've found that the work times for people that are working from home are a little different than the work times that people who are in the office. For instance, as long as your work can accommodate this, right? I'm working like now, right? 8 to 11 p.m. at night. I'm also working heavily from about 9-ish to about 3 to 4-ish. Why? Because I've a kid. And some of us do as well, have kids that are younger. And so I'm dropping off, I'm picking up, we're doing dinner, they're going to bed, and then I go back to work. And there's a lot of people who will work from home that are doing that. So work from home from a perspective of a business owner, if you say that you're trying to do these great things for employees and have all these initiatives that are pro-employee, work from home is a very... aligns with that's a show. You're showing that you do it. You're not saying it and not doing it. So yeah, I have very, very strong views on this topic. That's why I'm sweating in a car in the middle of Mississippi to have this conversation.
All right. So question, did you have barbecue by chance if you were in Mississippi?
I will even shout out. Yes, I've had barbecue multiple times. I've actually eaten twice in Clarksdale. Once at Abe's Barbecue, which is about a decade-old institution, and we ate at this place called Levon's, which is it's one of the better places we've eaten so far. I've had multiple barbecue downtown in Oxford. That was really good. This Levon's over here, we just came out of real shrimp and grits was great. They boudin balls, that was kind of little Louisiana kind of fusion type of deal. I had a corn rib. They made corn into like ribs. That basically tastes like Mexican street corn. It was wonderful. So yes, I've had barbecue every single day I've been in Mississippi, but some other stuff too.
All right. So not only is he sweating, but he's meat sweating. So we're moving on from that. I was trying to set up that joke, but you took the long way around to get to it. So
well, you can tell me you're setting up a joke. You can't allude too much. I got up at 5 a.m, so I'm running on meat fumes. Okay, we're moving on past that.
Yeah.
Because, meat fumes is not a good way to say that after that conversation. All right, Rob, let's go ahead and move to the pros for you as an employer.
Yeah, I mean,
for remote.
we've kind of all said it. I mean, I think you can't undervalue the access to global talent, because you're not restricted to your region. Sometimes you can have a hard time hiring people because of the cost of living in your area, and you can reduce that barrier. There's a lot of barriers you can get rid of with this. And by that, you can add in other type of cultural thinking because you have people from different parts of the country bring in different ideas, different perspectives all the time. So I think it can really enhance your business if you can incorporate this. You can also, as we all said, it's a flexibility with the employee to be able to alter their time sometimes. It increases their, not just productivity because they're not interrupted, but they're happier and they're more appreciative of the situation. And there's a little bit of a fear factor, I think, too. When you're working at home, you don't want to lose that. So you're going to make sure you get things done. And, whereas in the office, you're there, you kind of feel like, oh, I'm safe. I can talk to my buddy. I can walk around, and you go from office to office, and then it takes you some time to get back into things. But I think you can really be a lot more productive at home, and that is a huge factor. I think another thing for businesses that are important, if you use remote working and that's part of your model, you can scale. You can scale either up or down quickly. So if you need more employees, you have a bigger base to look for employees. So you can maybe add in people quicker. If you have to shrink your business. Unfortunately, you could. I mean, you have eliminated the cost of a structure, possibility of having an office, all of these sort of things that we've mentioned also. So I think there's a lot of benefits for this, including if you needed 24/7 coverage, because as Alan has, there's workers outside the country that are working during the day. You could have them all over the world. So you can have 24-hour coverage for your company if you need that. So these are all benefits for remote working if it works for your model.
All right. So we've talked a lot about pros. And if you're looking at your screen right now, for those of you that are going to be listening to this on podcast, which is coming very soon. So you'll have hours and hours and hours of listening to our bad jokes and meat sweat commentary at your fingertips. Josh Lazar, he does not have a tech think tank logo as his back screen. It's actually Josh Lazar. Like, I think we just need to do, like, he missed his opportunity as a actor, as it should be just Josh.
Just Josh. Yeah. Sorry. I'm here with my with someone from the team, and they need to charge their phone. So we had the trunk up, and I was trying to do some of the things. So they're trying to find a charger. So this is live. This is real. This is what happens when you try to do a live stream in a car in the middle of Mississippi, and you're only on.
Yeah. We haven't hit live from New York yet. We've only made it to live from Mississippi. So we'll get there, guys. We're focusing on it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about cons from a business perspective, right? So this is there are cons when it comes to this. One, you don't know unless you're, and there's a balance here, because there is software that can tell you where people are working from, when they're logging on, what websites they go on, all kinds of fun stuff based on their IP, how long they've left it open without inactivity. So there's lots of technology out there that can help you manage it if you feel that you need to do it to that point. However, I will say that there's a balance there with you're losing trust of your employees if you're having to do that. The other part is, what are your results looking like, right? So if you're not tracking how that translates into results, or if you don't know, we did a show about KPIs, right? Yeah. Understanding what your KPIs are, how much you should be producing. If that person is not meeting those production targets that they should be, that's your indicator for that, right? So to me, when it comes to looking at that, if I've got an eye on what they're producing and I know what they should be producing, I can tell whether they're doing their jobs or not, right? And I don't care if they're doing it from Venezuela. Well, I shouldn't say Venezuela, because I don't care if they're doing it from Costa Rica, or if they're doing it from the United States, or if they're doing it from Germany. Because guess what? I'm half German, and I'll be traveling to Germany. So when I take my laptop, they can't tell what's behind my wonderful backdrop here, Seven Lights backdrop, right? So but the con is with that is you will have people, if you don't have a strong culture and you don't have a strong buy-in, that will take advantage of that. Also, for you leaders, as a leader, so take the management out of it and start thinking about it as a leader. As Alan mentioned earlier, sometimes it makes you wonder, or if you're an anxious leader about whether people are doing that, it may contribute to you feeling disconnected, disjointed, and there's that F word again, right? Not for forward, as we've mentioned before, but for feeling, because there are feelings and anxieties that come up from that, right? So as a leader, you need to be secure enough in your leadership style and the culture that you've built and the ability to see what's going on, so that anxiety does not creep in. Because if you micromanage, you will lose your team and they will leave. Nobody, I don't care who it is, nobody wants to log into their computer knowing that if they are not logged in exactly at 8 o'clock on the IP address that you want them to be logged in on, and all this stuff is monitored, they will hate their job. Nobody likes that. It's very intrusive. It means that you don't trust them, and that's going to create barriers for you. So it is a con to work for them remotely only if you don't trust or you are not mature enough as a leader to build the trust and the culture and the buy-in that allows for that to happen, right? So that's a con. The other con is some organizations, as we mentioned earlier, cannot do that. They just literally can't. They're a retailer, they're whatever, they're brick and mortar. They need to have their people there. Also, if you have disparate teams all over the place, it's very difficult to build connection and esprit de corps between regionally separated teams. I experienced this when I was working for Disney. We had teams all over the place. So it takes a more concerted effort and more planning to be able to incorporate the communication that's required to make it work, right? And making sure that you're spotlighting those times together that you are together. Now, those are all cons. For me, the only other con is from a technology standpoint and a security standpoint, right? If folks are floating around and wherever they are and you have sensitive data and you don't have it closed and you're relying on them to go through a VPN and they're not doing it, or they're in the Starbucks, which we all know, if anybody has ever watched anything on information security, if you're in Starbucks or an airport or at a McDonald's, it's not secure. So you're relying on them to do that. However, you can build that into the tech stack, right? So that they have to go through a VPN tunnel to do that. So yes, there are cons. You have to have some sophistication. You have to be comfortable in your leadership style. You have to focus on your team and building alternative ways to do that. So that may be a little bit more work, right? That's the cons. I'm not going to go in and say, this is my opinion of what you should do yet, right? And then the other part is, it may be more difficult to do that with smaller teams than larger teams, because smaller teams and startups are just building their culture. So there's something to be said for being together, working towards the same goal, and taking those core values that make you successful as a startup and building that into a culture for the rest of the team. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I have officially judged everyone on who's listening to this, so I apologize if it came across that way. But I do want you guys to be thinking about that. So, Rob, you are at the top of my box here, so I'm going to let you wax poetic on cons.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the culture, because you have to make sure there's a strong culture there, especially if they've never worked in the office environment, or you're not doing a hybrid where they're there part of the time and then at home. Because you have to make sure that they don't become disengaged. Like you said, you have to be a good leader where you're not micromanaging them, but you want to make sure that they're comfortable, that they're engaged in the process and communicating well, so the tasks don't fall through the cracks. For me, I think that's one of the most important things. And, currently with my clinic, I do some remote stuff. So, some of the days are in the clinic, some of the days are remote, where I see patients through telemedicine. And there are actually employees at the office. So I'm the remote one, but we still every morning do like a 5 or 10 minute huddle. We go over the goals of the day. The employees report to me what they're going to do, their huddle. They lead them actually. And for the daily huddles, and plan the day out. And so we keep them engaged.
We're bleeding into other conversations. What's the con? What's the con?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest con for me is to make sure that they're not getting disengaged, and then you're going to lose employees that way. That's another way you lose them, besides micromanaging, I think. But I see a lot of positives for remote work personally. I don't have a lot of negatives.
All right. Josh, he's already told us that he's a proponent of remote work. Tell me the cons, Josh, from a technical perspective, from a security perspective, and from whatever other perspective you may have. You're muted.
That's what I get for trying to blow the AC while I'm in this car. It is hot. So
Alan, he's cheating. He's not
I'm
saying
cheating.
true
I'm trying to
fact.
cheat. I apologize.
It's true.
I'll sweat here with you. So okay. Let me tell you a couple of things. So one, on the con side, as an employer, or honestly even as an employee, camaraderie is not the same, and we're calling it different things, but it's true. You can be at a physical office 8 hours and do zero work. But you can at least walk over. You can at least walk over to another person and have a conversation with them. You're losing the drive-by conversations. You're losing the feeling like you're in this together in physical presence, because I don't think we as humans were built to like not work together in person. Really, I understand that's not how we got to where we are today as a species. We work together. We work together well, and we're not completely hesitant and afraid of communicating with others like us. Usually, there's some hesitation, but those are some of the traits that make us who we are. So that is a huge con.
So, Josh, I'll say this. Are you still working together, just like we are working together on this show right now, despite the fact that you're in Mississippi, I'm in the Panhandle, Alan is sweating in South Florida, and Rob's in Orlando. So I would argue that you're still working together, and if you're in offices, you're not seeing each other anyway with the door closed if you've got your head down doing your thing. So I would say there has been a trend more lately, right, to in probably the last 10 years or so, where you have less offices, enclosed offices, and if there are offices, they're large glass, walls or whatever, so that people can see. We call them fish bowls affectionately. But most office spaces now that have lots of people that do go to work together, they're low walls, so you can still see each other. They're brown noise, so you can't hear each other technically. You shouldn't, at least beyond your space, because there's no walls. But how is that any different?
Well, right now we're synchronous. That's part of it. Right now we are synchronously communicating together because anyone can interrupt each other. We're all on camera. We're all looking together, right? So we are together because we are all in synchronous communications. When you're in the office, you also can be relatively within synchronous communications. Someone can interrupt you, pro and con. Someone can have a casual conversation, pro or con. You can flip either side of that. What I'm saying is that it is still a con. I'm not saying there aren't other alternatives to have good asynchronous communications, specifically meaning at the time, communications at the time that's available to you. Think text messaging, emailing, chat communications. But what I'm saying is, if you're talking about a con from an employer, yes, this is great, except we're not going to be on camera for 8 hours of your day while you're in your work day. You're just not. So I definitely understand that concept if we're just talking about cons. I will also talk to the technological perspective. Anything you think is a con can be overcome by technology if you have the money and the time to spend it. So yes, you could be in a Starbucks and connect to their Wi-Fi, and there's technology that will either stop you from connecting to open public Wi-Fi, or that will throw the VPN behind the scenes that you don't even know that it's happening, and protect you with an umbrella, if you will, of coverage. So there are lots of things you can do technologically to make this easier, but you have to have the time to do it. You have to have the desire to do it. You have to have the money to do it. And when I'm doing technology assessments, we're seeing that not all this technology is in a lot of organizations, especially ones that weren't really remote first before the pandemic or even the last 5 years. And now they've been just flipped to remote because they had to, because they were forced to, and they're forgetting some of the major steps to secure yourself to. So the reality is, yes, technology can be a con. You can overcome those cons, but they're still real. Like you have to do a lot to protect from end users that are not knowledgeable about what you really need to do. it takes an effort, and not everyone has those people in their organization or are paying for that.
So Josh is not a fan of fractional conversations. We've got this. But that being said, there's also, and I will sprinkle this in there for those of you that are concerned about that, there's also database level and software level software like I've recently become aware of and engaging with technology called lightbeam.ai. So check that out. That basically goes in and monitors that traffic back and forth. It can protect your data, not just from that first line of defense, because remember in cybersecurity, you're looking for 3 lines of defense, right? There's also the internal one, so the last wall. All right, so I'm gonna pivot here, and go to Alan. Pivot to Alan. Alan, Smarty Pants with a Z. What are your cons?
Z. I mean, honestly, I really agree with Josh. I do feel the camaraderie is a factor, and like, it's like I know my employees, but I don't know my employees. Like, I mean, it's just I've during the pandemic, for example, when I was in a BNI group, we met on Zoom. Like, I joined the group when it was already on Zoom. And I did not connect with anyone in the group just because, you're doing your presentation, your 60-second infomercial, and it's so easy to just look away and not pay attention and things like that. So for me, I think when you have a relationship that's exclusively on Zoom or remote, and, you're not interacting face to face on a consistent basis, I just think there's that human level connection that can't be established. And I'm a big relationship guy. And for me, that feels like something that if you're going to be fully remote, you can't establish the same type of connection you could if you're, in person. And there is something to be said about kind of like that, that locker room kind of, vibe, right? You are all in this together. So when you're around each other more consistently, you have, you're going through the same trials and tribulations, the same wins and things like that. Whereas online or Zoom or remote, it just doesn't feel the same as it does in person. So for me, it comes down to more like that emotional factor, that connection factor that, when I never see my employees other than on a small screen, it doesn't feel like I'm getting to know them, being more intertwined with their lives than I would if they were in person. So that to me is the biggest con. As much as there are positives, to me that comes to be the biggest negative. And then from an employer perspective, like I said earlier, there is that concern that, all right, are they really consistently, doing work at the hours that they're supposed to be? How often are they just kind of, taking a break without me noticing? But that could also happen, in person. But for the most part, it comes down to that connection standpoint.
Alan, can I ask you, because some of the concerns you say I agree with too, but to try to engage with your employees, do you have like a scheduled time to meet with each of them just to discuss whatever they want to discuss? No agenda, like just to kind of meet with them and just chat, whether it's social or like work or whatever it is?
Yeah, we had we have obviously like our weekly meetings, and then I have like, quarterly, monthly progress calls. But I did try it's been inconsistent, honestly, but I've kind of started a company happy hour that we're doing on Fridays here and there, where it's more just kind of like talking about like what you're doing on the weekends, like what's going on in life, and just trying to connect so it doesn't feel like everything is only about work and we're only talking on Google Chat and Zoom about just work stuff. So I've tried to implement that. I don't think it replaces that in person that I was discussing, but it definitely helps.
Right.
Awesome. So you bring something up actually that I'll describe when we talked about COVID. So I'm going to pivot us again. So pivot again. Pivot. That's going to be our favorite word on this show, I think. How does remote work impact culture? We've been beating around the bush. We've been talking about it. We've been, all over the place on that topic. Let's go ahead and address it. So how does working remote or not just remote, because that's not your only option, hybrid impact culture. Now, I talked a little bit about culture from a perspective of building one from a startup, right? When you're a mid-size, so 10 plus employees in the organization or larger, right? That is a little bit different because the layers and levels of complexity, right? If you add layers to an organization, and I'm a fan of flatter organizations, right? That's my personal way of dealing with that. But if, as you get larger, you're going to have to add layers of complexity, which means that there's going to be more separation between those layers, and especially as you go further up the chain, right? So culturally, that's a challenge, because if you're the CEO or the founder or the co-founder, or there's even chief culture officers out there, or the chief HR, I forget what they call them now. There's a C something for that.
Like a chief people officer or something.
Yeah,
like that.
chief people officer. There you go. Chief people officer. That's what I was looking for. So, how do you set that culture if they're working remotely, right? How do you, especially in a large scale organizations, like one of the things we did when I worked for Disney was we did 365s, right? So we had culture surveys, and then we also, and those culture surveys were 365, meaning I was a VP, then I had those individual contributors that were rating me, my leaders that were under me were rating me, my leaders that were above me that were rating me, and vice versa, right? So the attempt was to understand, do people feel, because culture is all about how people feel, right? It's about how do they feel about what they do, how they do it, and what's the heartbeat of, by the way, UCF football, thank you for going back to the heartbeat, one team, one heartbeat slogan, because I love that. Sidebar, sorry about that, folks. You all know we're football fans, which, by the way, this is a great time to plug. At some point soon, there will be a new podcast featuring all of us that won't be as professional. That will be talking about our sports fandom. So we've all had podcasts in the past, as you know. We're combining forces to take over the world. No. We're
our powers combined
to talk about this, and we have a former UCF football player that's agreed to join us on this podcast. So you'll actually get a viewing point from a recent football player who was very, very successful while he was here. So I'm super excited about that. All right, pivoting back to culture. Pivoting back to culture. One of the challenges, like you said, is just being around each other, is spending time with each other, overcoming things together, seeing what the other people are going through, right? It requires a whole nother layer of ingrained communication. Has to be in your DNA as an organization. If you are working remote, you have to have it incorporated into your roles, how you guys execute on those roles, how often you meet, what the expectations are on how much you communicate, because you can't read body language as well, right? You can't tell, hey, they're on the meeting. If you're a leader, they're on a meeting with you for an hour, but were they moping around the rest of the day and putting on a show for you? You know what I mean? You can't see all of that. So hereby, the requirement is, the requirement is, you have to be really good at communicating and earn the trust of the people around you that they can be comfortable enough to truly tell you what they think, right? From a culture perspective. In addition to that feeling of togetherness, right? You have to celebrate when you are together as an organization. Set time aside where the entire organization is together and celebrate wins, right? Talk about the challenges that people overcame. Make sure that you're showing all the good work that's being done. Make sure that you're recognizing people in front of the entire organization. do those things so that people feel like they're part of the team and that they're recognized by the rest of the team, because you miss that when you miss the day-to-day. Like sales teams, a big thing is to ring a bell when a sale is made, right? Or hit a button. I had an easy button, whatever your tradition is, you don't get that. Well, how do you do that? Do you send out an instant message? Do you have a, one of the things that I like to do, and we actually have one for this, is we have a chat where we have a group chat where everybody's together. We're all talking about various things. That's another way you can communicate and celebrate wins and keep people up to date with each other. Now, you don't want them on the phones all day, right? But it's a way for you to feel connected. And then culturally speaking, like I said, the challenge at a low level is creating a culture. But once you get to the larger scale of the culture, if you have a culture, you have a way of doing things, if you have an attitude of how you're going to attack something every day, you can export that culture much easier with that. And then repetition and regulation. And what I mean by that is, if folks, I don't know if that was a sneeze, Alan, but bless you if it was. If it wasn't,
thank you.
I don't know. So clearly it was. So anyway, the point is, when we're talking about this, is making sure to build that into your organization. Because if you do that and you focus the time, that's not the time for you guys to get together and just meander and talk BS, right? You can actually get more time out of those meetings, more efficient time, and have them focus on their work more, right? If you ingrain that into everybody's schedule, you have those times, and that's where actually, and Josh, I'd love for you to talk about this too, is there's different types of meetings that you can have, right? Scrum type meetings, which is technically a technical or a techie or an IT type software development type meeting. You can apply that to your stand-up meetings, right? To make sure that you're being as successful and as efficient and set expectations so that you're using that time wisely. It should give you more time back, right? To actually producing the work. So from a culture perspective, it's focused on that. No, Josh, we cannot hear the rain.
Great. There's a lot of it.
Window. There's a song about that, but unfortunately, it was from the 90s, so some of our listeners may be too young for that. But we cannot hear it on the show. So, Josh,
great.
I'm gonna send it back to you. Notice I didn't use the P word. I'm gonna send it back to you, and if you could, obviously share what your thoughts are on this, but also kind of talk about the different types of meetings and that you can apply towards making these meetings efficient. By the way, sorry guys, this week I don't think we're going to hit the 107. I think we're going to be way beyond that. So this is a really meaty topic. So go ahead, John.
Yeah. So lots of things. One, I might not go as techie as you think, but I have a lot of experience in trying to make meetings as efficient as possible from a lot of perspectives. So I'm going to go into a mini diatribe, but wait with me. It's worth the wait. Also of note, so let's go all the way back. One, in one of my last roles, I decided to eliminate all meetings, meaning absolutely no meetings. Didn't allow them. Everything had to be asynchronous. And while that actually worked for a lot of time, I realized there's some meetings that were needed. So we went from no meetings for multiple years to just 2 meetings a week. Well, actually, it was one meeting a week. It was only half an hour, and the meeting rotated every half hour. So what we did was, we were talking about this earlier. If you want to have culture and impact, it's good to actually have these type of synchronous communication meetings. We did something called the happy half hour. I should trademark that or whatnot. So we just did a half hour of just, let's get on camera, talk about the week, right before Friday, right before lunch. We're all doing something, want to blow up some steam. And these weren't people who were all working from remote. These were all people in multiple offices in multiple areas. So that was a meeting that was planned out to be culturally significant and have a conversation so we can actually just see each other together. On top of that, we had, we also then took the other, so that was 1 week, and every other week we actually had a team meeting, just a basic stand-up meeting. So the way we did the stand-up meetings in a efficient manner is we took the stand-up meetings and we rotated the owner of the meeting. When we rotated the owner of the meeting, that allowed us to not be the Josh show every day, and other people would get the agenda and put it out and figure out what we wanted to talk about. And these are the only things that were not in our asynchronous communications. So if we're talking in chat, we're talking email, these are things that are going on. We don't talk about those things. That's not on the agenda. We also make sure that all the meetings that we did, so that those are two different types of meetings that we did that I've experienced and were pretty successful. If you're in person and abilities allow, a good way to take a meeting that people try to schedule for an hour and no meeting should be an hour, in my opinion, and make it really short is have a literal stand-up meeting. You stand and talk. People will want to make sure people get out quicker if you're in a meeting where you're literally standing. Again, there's abilities and things like that. So if you can't do that, I understand. But that is something I've seen really work. I've cut meetings from an hour to like 15 minutes by literally not using chairs. I've also had some other interesting different meetings, not only setting the agenda, but playing with times. There's a default in Outlook and Gmail for times. Why? Why are your meetings an hour? Why are they 40 minutes? Why are they 30 minutes? You might want a little bit of time to chat up front, and you might want a little bit of time to wind. We'll get to the next actions at the end, but why are you having these long meetings? Every single organization I go into, if I'm doing an analysis or looking at operations, or if it's things I've been in the past, I'll just set default and don't think about it. But if you actually, this is interesting. I've had people do this for years, and now I think multiple organizations are doing it. I had people take the hourly wage of every single person in that meeting and tell you how much that meeting costs to the company. And because of that, when you do that, you realize, well, if you work for, a lot of us work in legal, and if you pull 10 partners to a 30-minute conversation, there might be thousands of dollars of, quote, lost or not billable productivity just because anyone can schedule a meeting, but no one would spend $5,000 flippantly. So there are lots of different meetings and ways you can do meetings to make them shorter, make them effective, make them efficient, and make them needed and only done when needed. I absolutely abhor most meetings because they're usually not done and structured in that way. So when you actually structure them well, when you have an agenda, when you stay on topic, when you put them for less time than you need, I've never scheduled a short meeting that went long. Really,
three questions.
Time.
Three questions on your weekly meeting, right? It's what's gone well. What do you need help with, and what are you working on?
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
That's all you need. And especially with Scrum type meetings, I really encourage, I keep saying Scrum, I encourage you all to look at Scrum type meetings because that will make them efficient. Use the time as your one-on-ones because you're going to need more one-on-ones if you do that, more frequency in one-on-ones to really get into the nitty-gritty, right? And that builds trust too. So, all right, I'm going to swing or pivot to Rob. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the hard part is, like you said, in a bigger company, you have the culture already set, right? So the expectations are there, the whole workflow's there, all this. But how do you, like Alan said, how do you incorporate someone new in? They may just be lost forever. So you have to have part of the process how to incorporate new people in to make them feel part of the team. And if you don't, that employee's not going to be happy, and you lose the benefit of giving them flexibility, giving them autonomy, giving them their work schedule, all these sort of things to try to improve retention and get better employees in this, you may lose all that ability with that. So you do have to have a system there. I agree with Josh. I like to have very short meetings, to the point, standing meetings, what are you going to do the day, the task that, and then once a week I have a kind of KPI where the employees present the KPIs. And it's not to solve any problems. It's just a report, see where we are. Are we red, yellow, or green for the month? And we have a monthly meeting to solve that kind of stuff, unless it's kind of a black swan event, like things are going terribly, right? You don't want to adjust your course too quickly. So I think as far as culture and in bringing them in, it's that regular communication, one-on-ones with people, and not just about their work. Make sure that they're engaged in the work, make sure that they're happy, that they're not struggling, so that they're more productive. And then that brings a caring and shows value to the employee, because I think that's one concern when people are remote. It's hard to show value of them without them being around, like you were talking about, Roger, celebrating wins, congratulating people, pointing out what they're doing well. You have to consciously do this and really support this, because they're not getting that affirmation throughout the day with other employees or with you there or that. They may be very isolated for most of the day and just chatting on chat or emails, and it's not the same as verbal communication. So there has to be a lot of kind of planning and structure set up to make sure that your culture is good and really to incorporate it. So.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that that we did is we had a very specific process for everybody that was onboarded in when they were coming on remote, right? So we had a step-by-step process for the individual leaders, for the organization, the HR people, et cetera. Everything was personalized for them, right? That's important. And then actually doing meet and greets. So I think that's super important, is to do those meet and greets on the front end, so that they understand that you're important enough for us to do that. And also, if you do them with the leaders, then they understand that's an opportunity for your leaders to kind of imprint on them who you are as an organization. So that was part of our onboarding process for that as well, for remote employees. So totally agree with you on that.
I think to add to that, the other point is you have to make sure you're following the values of your company. So we all set our values of what we feel are important for our company and our employees, and even ourselves in the role. And when you're interviewing and hiring people, you want to make sure that they really fit into those. And that's even more important with remote, because you can't rely upon, if you're a bigger organization, of everybody kind of rising everyone up if they're in an office environment or all together all day. So, I think that's super important is to make sure you vet the person on the front side to make sure they're going to be a good fit for your culture.
Yeah, that's interesting too, which we didn't talk about, was, how important that front end conversation is when you're interviewing people, to kind of help with that, decide whether they're going to be a fit for you, because you have that remote culture. So, all right, let's go ahead and pivot again, to pivot. How does remote work impact employee retention? So for me, it's it is a double-edged sword. Let's say that. There is the possibility that if you don't do a good enough job connecting with them, or incorporating them, or including them, or making them feel like they're part of the organization, that in a world where right now there are not enough employees or potential employees, right, to fill all the roles that are out there. Our unemployment is the lowest it's been in recorded history, I think, right? And there's a lot of people that have not come back into the workforce, so that impacts it as well, right? However, all of this means that the employee in the last 3 to 4 years has been has had more choice. And younger generations, I know my generation, and I hate to say my generation, back in my day, I grew up with every 3 to 5 years, you should be moving on so that you're moving up. Right. And that was a break from previous generations where it was, okay, you stay with the company, right? But in exchange for that, the company is going to give you a retirement, right? And you're going to be able to retire at a reasonable age and live out your life. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So employees have pivot to, have pivoted to
Pivot.
yeah, there we go. Being more competitive, right? And they have the power because the employment rate is low. So if you don't make that connection with them, it can add to them leaving, right? If they don't feel like they're part of your organization, or if they feel like they're micromanaged, going back to that, as we talked about earlier, because you've got every piece of software on earth and to know everything that they're doing, and they've got to clock out for every bathroom break, etc. People, if you're putting people on a salary, if they need to go to the bathroom, don't keep an eye on them or count that against them as a demerit. The reason you're putting them on a salary is because they're going to work to get the job done, whether it's within the scope of the hours that you've assigned them, that you have a building there for them, or if they're doing it from home. So don't micromanage people to that extent. You will lose them 100% of the time. And if you don't lose them, they're going to be really unhappy. And guess what? People that are not engaged, they do not perform at the same level. Period. That's statistically proven. So again, at the end of the day, you have to be able to trust. Now, the flip side of that is if you're giving people the flexibility to do that, if you're giving them you're saving them on gas, you're saving them on tolls. I mean, let's take Orlando, for example. If you went to UCF, we have the 408, we have the 528, we have the 417. And then if you got to get on the turnpike, that's $35, right? Unless you have e-pass. So make sure you get your night pass. Come on, UCF, you need to start paying me for all these plugs, right? But at the end of the day, you're saving them time, you're saving them money, you're giving them flexibility, you're allowing them to see their kids off to school, you're allowing them to make memories, they can make dinner. For those of us, and we've all seen them, the salespeople that have shorts on with a sport coat. I will not say that I have not had meetings where I haven't had a pair of gym shorts on with a sport coat and a button up. So people have not seen that, but it is a perk, right? Especially in a hot house like Alan with Smarty Pants with a Z. I think his computer died a little earlier from all the heat because he popped out of the stream, but he's back now. So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is it is a benefit for you because people appreciate the ability and the trust to be able to do that. And in that case, I would argue that it is a advantage as long as you build the trust and you do the work on the front end to build the relationship with them. It is an advantage for you. People are, even if they hate the job, they are more likely to stay home. And I'll use myself as an example. My ex-wife was an accountant, and as an accountant, she can, or still is an accountant, she can stay home. So the benefit for us was when that happened, she could stay home with the kids, right? Especially when 2020 hit, she was able to stay home with the kids. And I don't know how she did it. So more power to her that she handled the kids being home, trying to get them to school and doing a job, but she did it. She did it well. But the point is if you need to stay home with the child or they're sick, not permanently, but if they're sick or something, they can do that. So you're giving that ability to be a parent without them having to use sick leave, which means now you can transition to PTO time, right? Paid time off instead of sick leave and vacation time. You're giving them more control over that time. People appreciate that if you do that for them. or for me, you're also getting better talent, right? I'm more likely to stay with your organization because I get to live in Santa Rosa Beach if I want to. Period. I can still do my job, right? So I would say it works both ways, but if you do your job as a leader, people leave leaders, they don't leave jobs. If you do your job as a leader for your people and they do work remote, I would argue that it is a retention tool for you to keep them when otherwise you may not. All right, that's my stance on that. Smarty Pants with a Z, Alan Levin, the true champion because Josh is cheating with his air conditioning in his vehicle. What are your thoughts
on employee retention specifically?
Yes. Does working remote increase, decrease, or how does it impact employee retention in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from my experience that, when I worked, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and when I worked at podcast, that was when I worked at Comcast, excuse me, that kept me there for a while. The fact that I could work from home, something that I had not experienced before like that. And it made me appreciate, my management team a little bit more, that they were allowing me that flexibility, something I hadn't had in my career prior to that. So I do absolutely think it has a huge impact on retention. I think an employee wants to know that, their life doesn't have to be all about work, and they don't have to spend the 5 days of the week at the same cubicle, the same spot, for 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So I think there's an inherent appreciation when, you're able to be remote or semi-remote. So I absolutely, there's a lot of noise there.
I think it's feedback.
It's me. Sorry about that. No, that's me. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So I do think it impacts employee retention. I think if you're willing to be flexible, then it's going to allow your employees to stay a little bit longer, because if you don't offer it, someone else may will. So that's my opinion on that.
All right. Awesome. So employee retention, I don't think we've heard from Josh on that. Josh, what do you think?
All I'll say is this. I know people who have left jobs because they forced them to move into go from fully remote or mostly remote to mostly in the office. And we might all know someone who's done that. I think remote work, if it applies to what you do as an organization, if it is possible, two things. One, once you take that genie out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. Because you put it back in, basically here's what's going to happen. For the most part, you get nice lightning behind you. No, kidding. What you get for the most part is you get people who are going to be resentful that you've taken this perk away from them. And then if they have the ability to, will probably find other jobs. Then you can hire people who don't know of that perk and they don't know any different. And that's fine, as long as no one else is in that same situation and they're all gone. And the cost of actually rehiring and retraining people is exorbitant. To me, it's better just to continue how things are. And if there are issues, address the issues. To me, remote work relating to employee retention is all about leadership, like we talked about before, and it's all about adapting your managerial or leadership style if this is your normal. So with Tech Think Tank, we're 100% remote. The gentleman who is with me here on this trip and we're doing these assessments, we haven't seen each other. The only time we see each other is when we go out to eat lunch in town or we're on a 3-day trip, right?
Josh, is he in the car with you right now? Is he suffering?
He is not. No,
okay,
he's not
good.
in the car suffering. He's outside listening to blues music that I am not. But no, it's if I would, I just like turn and like, hey, here's Mitch. No, empty seat. So here's the thing. When it comes to that retention, you don't have to be in person always to have these communications. But I've seen it so many times. It's not one person. I've seen it many times when you allow that as a wonderful benefit and go, I want you back in the office. It is not good. So how it impacts retention, it negatively impacts retention if it's given as a, even if it's a temporary perk because of the pandemic. And everything by KPI or otherwise seems like we're all working well, and then you pull it back, and you can, we'll see what happens, because I've seen a lot of articles and studies, and I haven't dug into the details of the backgrounds of who are funding these, but you can see, at least I've seen, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt being put out there that remote work is a great idea. And, you know, it's very interesting. It is. So I think the only negative impact to employee retention for remote work is if you take away remote work. Otherwise, it's typically all positive from my experiences, both managing a completely remote team and going from full-time to a hybrid, and having some hybrid situations when I was on paternity leave, to be honest. So it's really, to me, a net positive. It has been both of my experience on both sides, as an employee and an employer.
I will say this, for anybody who's exploring or recruiting on either a hybrid or a remote model, stick to what you say in your job descriptions. Yeah. Okay. Don't go out there and put a job description out there that's remote or hybrid. Put someone through the interview process, and then start negotiating with them, especially if it's hybrid, on how many days a week they're going to be in the office. Don't do that. I've had that happen to me.
Also of note, I was going to say, also of note, if you have an introductory period where you need to be in person, note that too. And I don't think there's anything wrong saying, hey, to get to the culture and whatnot, we're like 4 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. When you're introductory, you need to be in the office to learn some things. That's okay. But after a certain amount of time, we're good to go. I've seen that be successful. I don't know if you necessarily need it. That's a whole nother story. But I've seen it be successful in multiple organizations. Because if you say you're hybrid, but you're like, oh no, you're hybrid after 90 days, you have to put that in your job description.
So we would for our remote employees, we'd bring them in for a week. So we'd pay for a hotel room. We'd pay, to bring them into the home office for the first week. But it really grinds my gears for any Family Guy people out there. It grinds my gears when people say, hey, you're going through the interview process and you're advertising this as a fully remote or a hybrid, right? But a lot of times it's fully remote. And then you get through the interviews, right? And then either A, you decide, hey, I'm going to take a local candidate because they're going to do the job locally. And I really, I only put it out there so I could attract enough talent. But now that I've got the talent, I'm just going to go with those people. That's not fair. Yeah. Don't put people through 2, 3, 4 interviews, right? Set the stage that that they've got a fair shot at it. Because guess what? Those people, if that was going to happen, they're giving up other opportunities right? They wouldn't have applied for your role.
Yeah.
That's not fair to those people. And then secondly, don't get all the way through the interview process and then say, hey, we'd like to have you there quarterly, or we'd like to have you there monthly, right? And then you get into it and then it's like, oh, well, I talked to the CEO and he'd really rather have you here 2 or 3 days out of the week. I had a job in Oregon that did this to me, right? Great job. They would have paid me, I think it was like $385,000 plus bonus, plus all this other stuff, right? And perfect fit for the job. Got along great with the senior management team, all that. And then the CEO decided, well, we're going to need you here 3 days out of the week. So basically what you just told me is it's no longer a remote job. I now have to move to Oregon, right? And I've wasted all of my time doing that. Or if I were to go out there, because they were willing to put me up and all that stuff, you're asking me now to fly out to Oregon once a week for 3 days out of the week, and then fly back to Orlando. I'm sorry, that's not tenable. If you want someone who's local, be local. Chief people officers out there, make sure your CEO understands that once you put it in paper, you're putting it out there. So, all right, I'm going to get off of my...
That sounded very personal. That's all.
It was very personal. I just gave a very personal example.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because, you know, you pivot and you put a lot of time and effort into it that's basically wasted. So,
yeah.
All right.
Just don't waste people's time. That's it. How about that? Let's just not waste people's time. Be very truthful and honest of what you're trying to do. That's
yes.
all.
And don't do it with me because obviously you'll be called out on the show. All right. Rob, anything on there? You've been waiting a long time because I've been on my soapbox here. Sorry.
No, I think you guys covered most of it. I think it is a double-edged sword. I think it's a great benefit and a way to retain people, to give them flexibility, like we've been talking all night. But if you don't have that right culture and you don't have that connection with them, and they don't have a connection with the company or the business, then they could be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So they could leave at any time, and then you have turnover over and over again. So that's where it can become a slippery slope and dangerous for you. So I think, like we talked earlier, you just have to make sure the culture's there, that they're incorporated, that you keep them engaged, and not micromanage them. Like you said, you know, let them have some autonomy and flexibility. And I think then it becomes a big benefit for your company and helps with retention.
All right. So not only have an autonomy conference or become part of the autonomy conference, but also have autonomous people. All right. I like it. All right. Empowering autonomy. UCF was recently empowered with autonomy this year on July 1st. So super excited about that. All right. Pivoting. Again, let's talk about our pivot. Next topic.
Feel like we need a radio drop here or something. Right?
Yeah, I know, right? If I had a mixer, I would totally do that, but StreamYard doesn't allow me yet. So I'll have to figure out how to do that. Alan is super captivated by our conversation, by the way, if you're watching this.
Why do you say that?
Because you were just focused, dude, and like no smile, no nothing. He's just like,
I'm just trying to listen.
I know. All right. How does remote work impact the quality and the quantity of the work? So I'm going to say this about that. First of all, it doesn't necessarily, it can actually be a driver of it, right? So we talked about time and giving people time and how they choose to utilize their time, right? So that's the quantity of work. Quality also goes back to, focus. Now, I will say this. There's a couple of things to consider about this. One, from a legal perspective, people may still require you to furnish them with appropriate, if they have a, I forget what they call it, not a disability is the wrong term.
ADA accommodation?
An accommodation. If they have an accommodation that's required, if you are full remote, you are still on the hook for providing them that accommodation, even if they're remote. Just putting that out there. However, what you can do is you can actually leverage it as a carrot. We always talk about motivating people with carrots as opposed to sticks, right? If you're an existing business that does not have remote and would like to incorporate that, or you are an existing business who would like to offer it as a perk or benefit, right? You can do that. You can make it performance-based and time-based. If someone has a certain level of experience, if they have a certain level of performance, there are people who work better when they're in the office. There are people who work better when they're at home. Hopefully you're weeding those out if you're a fully remote organization up front in the interview process. But if you're not, then you can make it performance-based. So for example, we would tell employees up front, you have to have at least a year time and grade. You need to be in your seat a year, right? See how you interact, blah, blah, blah. You can see how we interact, etc. If you reach certain performance metrics, okay, That means you can do it at a really high level here. We trust you to be able to do it at a really high level at home. So we will allow you to work from home. If you choose not to do that when you get at home and you don't continue that performance, clearly this is detrimental to your performance with respect to the organization. So therefore, you're going to come back in the office. And that's a great motivator for people, right? And it's fair, right? If you drop off, if your performance drops off because you decided to slack off when you get home, hey, I'm going to take that extra 45 minutes to sleep in, right? But that means that, oh, well, you know, I just woke up 45 minutes later and then I got to make my cup of coffee and then I got to yada, 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 insert whatever your routine is here. And all of a sudden you don't get started for an hour later and your performance suffers. You're coming back into the office because you clearly can't handle the responsibility to do that. Okay. So for organizations that have both, that is a carrot that you can utilize, and it's fair because we're basically saying, hey, we trust you. We trusted you to go home, but you took advantage of that trust. Or for whatever reason, there's an environment at home that doesn't allow you to perform at the same level. So we're going to provide that environment for you here. You're coming back in, right? But by and large, as we've said all along, the quality and quantity of work typically is better if someone is working remotely. So that's all I'm going to say about that because we mentioned it earlier. I'm going to pivot to Rob. Pivot. Rob?
Yeah, I think this really depends on the person, to be honest. I think people can do quality work and the quantity at home or in the office. Or you can waste time at either. I mean, we know The Office, Stanley, where he's like, this is a run the clock out situation, right? And we've probably all been in jobs like that at some point where we're hourly and we just run the clock out, because you're done with your work and you just sit there. So I think it really depends on the actual employee you have. And it goes back to our whole thing of culture and hiring the right person, vetting them, all these sort of things so that you have someone you can trust at home that's going to get their work done. They're going to be productive about it. You don't have to worry about it. And the production for the company goes. But I think at the same time, I agree with you, Roger. You have to have some guidelines there to say, hey, this is kind of a reward to work at home. Or, if you have a hybrid system and this is the reason you get to work at home. And if your production drops off, that's not really going to be there. So.
All right, Josh, looks like you need to get back to your Blues Bash, so I'm going to bring you in. We are running 20 minutes later than we normally do right now. Yeah. So, Josh, I'm going to let you have your take in here, and if you need to go, totally understand and work those meat sweats out.
Yes, I need to, seriously. So, I think that I'm going to yes and. It absolutely depends. There are definitely people I've worked with in a remote space that absolutely take advantage of being remote and aren't available when other people need to be available. I've also been in places where I don't even have to manage them anymore. They're so good at what they do, I just let them fly. So the quality and quantity of the work being done remotely depends solely to me on two factors. One, we've already talked about the employee aspects, if they have that intrinsic motivation or not. It also depends on the leader, the manager. If that person is letting you run on your own, but not setting up expectations, if you don't have KPIs, reach back to a few episodes back, right?
Are we getting to the point where we don't remember the episodes anymore, or are we creating that much content?
I wouldn't go that far. I just can't remember too much right now, period. And I wish I could say it's because I've had a couple of drinks. It's just all I'm doing all day right now is talking to people about things. So I've been doing interviews after interviews. I'm about 20 or 30 deep. So that's just me, not you. But I do think it also depends on the leader and the person moving that forward. Because if that person is giving you a path forward, but not micromanaging it, but not checking in or having some guys where you don't have a good two-way communication, the manager might think it might be an employee, and the employee might think it's a manager, and everyone's wrong. So if you don't have a good cadence of conversation between you and the people you work with, either on that same level or your leadership or managers, you might have a problem. And that's why, like for Tech Think Tank, we have a Discord channel we talk on every single day, or we have some meetups. When we get a little bigger, we're going to have probably every year at least a meetup, if not every 2 years, a meetup in a location. And we'll do both professional and business development type of activities and professional development on top of fun and enjoyment. And probably bowling will be in there somewhere as well. So, yeah, I think that impact depends on the pair and the grouping of people working together, because it can work really, really, really well, or it cannot. And I don't think that's on any employee or employer. It's that unit working together.
All right, so I'll say this too, from performance management, make sure that if you do have remote teams, so you have a location that's remote, so you have a cluster of people that are working somewhere else, another state or something, that the performance management that you do, make sure you have a space for them to go to where they can be on their own to have those conversations, because that's another model where it is technically remote, but it's remote because you have a team of people that are working at a place, your place, somewhere else. All right, Josh, before you skedaddle, can you give us an updates on GoldenKnightsClub.com and talk about your recent bowling adventures and how people can find you?
Sure. So a real quick, GoldenKnightsClub.com is going well. We're getting a little bit more engagement through the metrics. If you have a business, please reach out and add it to GoldenKnightsClub.com. As I said in previous episodes, by end of the year, I love quarter, but I'll suggest end of the year. I'd love to see people who are doing business through there, finding people through there, and let us know so we can highlight you on the show. So that's one there too. If right now we're in the middle of Mississippi doing an evaluation of intake for call center systems and technology. So if you happen to have that exact need and want us to fly out to your state, we'd love to help you out with those type of situations. But one of the more fun things we're doing is I'm really starting to get a little momentum on this a new venture, which is kind of like a side hustle to the side hustle called Some Spare Time, which is a kind of, I think I'm going to, I'm building live and creating live. So it probably will be something related to a fun social bowling league, but it's not all in one place. It's kind of impromptu and bespoke in different places. So in the last week, I've been to 3 different bowling alleys, 2 in Orlando, one in one up here in Oxford, and we're just meeting with people, having conversations. If a group of business owners, if you want to do something for charity, if you're looking for events that are bowling related or want to have camaraderie, or you want a remote work activity to do when you're all in person at one time in a location, let me know. Right now it's at somesparetime.com. And
so hold on.
Yeah.
I understand that Brittany attended one of these events. So one of our previous interviews, and great person and amazing personality. How did she bowl?
She did pretty good. I'll be frank. She did pretty good. I think she broke 100 once out of the 2 games, which was wonderful. So
with or without bumpers?
We actually had a discussion of bumpers, and I think we ended up no bumpers. And she did pretty well. So
awesome.
she was on there. Now I'm trying to figure out if other UCF alumni popped in. No, she did come out to that one, and it's. I love bowling. I didn't realize that's authentically me because I've been doing it for so long. So I'm going to see how this runs. And honestly, worst case scenario, openly, it's a wonderful way to have conversations and connections. And that's what I love to do.
All right. So where can they find you for Tech Think Tank?
Yeah, you can find me at techthinktank.com. You can just send me an email at josh@techthinktank.com. All real words, no Z's. Sorry, smarty pants. But
wow.
I know. know, but it's all the words that you know. But I have to say that because sometimes tech, you throw a 3 in there and all that type of stuff. No, just techthinktank.com. And yeah, we'd be glad to help you with anything you need. And I guess I might not be working with Sparty Pants with a Z, but you know what? We all know it because we say it all the time.
That's all right. You've got 2 marketing companies represented, so you're good.
Yeah, exactly. All right, everyone. I want to thank you so much for your time. Maybe I apologize, Alan. I am going to get into some air conditioning in a little bit, but it's going to be in the rain first if you see all the lightning if you're watching this live. So
lucky you.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
You'll get there. It'll be soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh, and we'll see you next week. Enjoy your time, and I expect pictures of all the great barbecue you've eaten. And make sure, and by the way, Josh met John Rice Plumlee's relatives in Mississippi.
I'm driving and I'm stopped at a stoplight and I see a Mississippi plate which has Plumlee on it. Like it can't be that there's some Cosmo.
And it's a black plate with the state of Mississippi's plates are not black. So I'm just saying it had to be UCF related. I
think it might be. I'll ask. We'll bring JRP when he owns a business onto here, and which he probably already does, and we'll ask.
All right. Thanks, Josh. We'll talk to you later. Have fun and get home safe.
We'll do, or we'll save it for the sports podcast.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Okay. So, Alan, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes down to, the quality and the quantity of the work. I think ultimately comes down to effective communication at the end of the day. I've been a remote employee and I've been a full-time in the office employee. And I think the communication affects the quality and the quantity and the leadership, like Josh mentioned. And if they're just overall a motivated employee that feels they're part of the culture, they have goals that they can meet, I don't really think it matters whether they're in person or not. The quality and the quantity should be there. If they have that motivation, they have a track and a path to succeed and meet their goals, their personal or professional goals. So for me, I think you can get the same quality and quantity of work whether you're in person or you're remote. And then from an employer side, I don't really know any different. I've never had a employee that's like right next to me, a couple feet away from me. So my experience has been positive overall in terms of quality and quantity. It just really, for me, came down to their talent level. So unless they were just, slacking and or something like that, it comes down to you pay what you get for. So if they're talented, the output should be there. Regardless of where they're working from.
All right. Rob, I'm not sure if you saw my message, but did you have anything to add for this one?
Yeah, I added a little bit earlier, but I wanted to add something else. I want to go back to a point you made earlier about how your employee may not miss work because of this, right? So their kids are out sick from school. If they're working at home, they could manage both and do their work and this. And so you don't lose those production days from some of your employees. So that could be a quantity work there where you're not missing out on productivity throughout the year. And, that's another benefit for remote work.
All right. Awesome. All right. I think this was a great discussion, honestly. And one thing I did want to include here, there was actually a pre-discussion. When we post these things, some people interact with us, right? And so there was actually, I posted something about this, I think it was earlier today or maybe yesterday late. And the way we all met was a great UCF sports website, ucfsports.com. Shout out to Brandon Hellwig, who's been doing it longer than anybody else. And as I like to call it, encyclopedia of UCF sports. He has all the ins and outs, relationships going back multiple administrations, etc. Brilliant guy. And so, believe it or not, sports guys are actually interested in this too, right? And so, one of the folks that was on there, a user JJ1987, JJ, I don't know what your actual name is, but it's JJ1987, and he said their organization uses something called the Keeper Test. And so the way they handle this is they challenge their leadership team and they say, hey, leadership team, every 6 months, I want you to evaluate whether this person is worth the money that we're paying them. Are we getting our dollars worth out of this person, right? If the answer is yes, great, we continue on. If the answer is no, and especially in the state of Florida, because it's a right to work state, as many states are, then that's not necessarily a remote driven decision, but it is a remote system that they have in place to evaluate talent. So they just part way, just like you would if someone was in person. But it's another check that they have and a mindset that they put their leadership team in, no matter what position you're in. If you're an individual contributor, you're a manager, you're a senior leader, etc. You are running your own business, right? So that individual contributor should be looking at their results as if they're running their own business, because you are charged with using company resources to deliver on performance. So as a leader in that organization, they look at it and say, okay, are they producing $100,000 worth of performance, especially as it pertains, because you know what your KPIs are relative to everyone else. And then they will get rid of them. And I think that's a great way to do it, a great question to ask. And, something else, look it up. It is a thing. It's called the Keeper Test. If you want to read more about that as a tool to help you with performance management as it pertains to remote work. Okay. So I think we've beat this to death. We're at 1 minute and 42, or an hour and 42 minutes. But it was a great conversation. A lot of people have a lot of opinions in this. I hope you found some value in it. Let's go ahead and move this into the time of the evening where you tell people how people can find you. And we're going to start with Alan from Smarty Pants with a Z.
With a Z. With a Z.
You need to do a Zorro motion every time we say with a Z. Mark it.
My background photo might cut my hand out, so I might have to.
You might just need to change it to a Zorro. Just take your logo off and make it a Zorro background.
That could be like my little icon, just a Z. Like
there you go.
My profile photo. But yeah, awesome podcast once again. As always, you could reach me at alan@smartypantsmarketing.com or on my website, the same URL as my email. I'm active on LinkedIn. You could reach me there. But the easiest way is definitely my email. And I look forward to next week's podcast and another topic.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for hanging out with us even longer than usual, especially given your circumstances. You get way more credit than Josh, who was cheating with his AC with his car. So, Alan, thank you so much for being here. And Rob, how about you? How can people find you?
The easiest way is probably just the website, myeternalvitality.com. That has phone number, email, social media, everything. And it tells you what our clinic's about, how we can help. And if you need us, give us a call.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Rob. You've had some unique insights with this topic too, which is super exciting. And for me, I mean, if doctors can do things remotely, anybody can do things remotely. So I'm just going to put that out there. All right. For me, for all your marketing needs in small business, legal, medical, higher education, video, 3D animation, or anything else, you can reach me at r.phipps@sevenlights-agency.com or visit our website, which is sevenlights-agency.com. Or for your consulting needs, you can reach me at bossleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And if you want to find out some more about lightbeam.ai, you can hit me up as well. So That concludes another episode, 1 hour, 44 minutes of amazing content, bad dad jokes, and a lot of business discussion. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. And remember to like, subscribe, and grind.